Hi, everyone. I am Rasika Narang, and as mentioned, I'm the SVP of Marketing at Viant, which is a programmatic media software company. Prior to this, I was in the agency world, Ogilvy, for several years. Super excited to be here because it's amazing to just see this dialogue change from the moment I began my career here. I am actually not from this country. I was brought up in India, moved here, and race and gender is something we didn't talk about back then when I started. And now when I look at, I'm also the mother of 3 kids. When I look at my kids and what they're going through in their school education today, it's amazing because it's talked about in school, I think, more than we talk about it in the workplace. And they're actually way ahead. My 9-year-old teaches me how to say things right constantly. But I think the one thing that is clear to me is how important it is for kids and people to actually see others represented in positions they want to see. I experienced that firsthand with my daughter, and I think that's really what David and Aanish actually represent with the organization RiseOUT. So let's take a moment for you guys to introduce yourselves, and then we'll get right into it.
That was a perfect, is this working? That was a perfect preamble. I didn't know that. That was fabulous. Happy Pride, everyone. And thank you, Brand Innovators, LVMH, for having us. And thank you for moderating, Rasika. I'm Aanish Panjabi. During my day job, I lead a team of mighty people of 15, and we do acquisition marketing. I work at a financial services organization, and we deploy everything from above the line marketing to below the line, starting with strategy and executing on that across 20 plus channels. With one of our co-brand partners. But today, I'm actually here to represent the organization that we started about a year ago in collaboration with David Knapp and one of our third founder, Julia Lopez, who unfortunately couldn't be here this morning or this afternoon. It's called RiseOUT, and we're of course going to spend the next 30 or so minutes talking about the organization, what we do, and why we actually initiated it. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Aanish. I'm David Knapp, co-founder of RiseOUT, and I also work in financial services, delivering a lot of digital marketing. Previously, I was a strategy consultant and worked in retail marketing as well.
So let's begin with the session title, The Lavender Ceiling. Aanish, can you tell us what that means?
Yeah. I wanted to say that this was a term that was actually coined by David Knapp, but then he burst my bubble when he said someone else actually came up with it. So lavender.
I came up with it independently, but then I fact-checked myself and realized someone else has already said it.
Yeah. Well, it's still a good title, and we truly believe in it. So I'm going to get a bit more personal, but I think a lot of people here would sort of resonate with this. When you're an LGBT kid and you're sort of growing up as an LGBTQ youth, you go through a number of emotions simultaneously. Like every minute you're in the schoolyard, you might feel invisible, you might feel illicit, you might feel intimidated, you might be confused about who you are and what sort of group or gender do you even identify with. Like you don't feel like you fit with the women, you don't feel like you fit with the men, and there's a lot of confusion generally in your head that you're trying to sort of parse through. I think as you're growing up and you're going through that journey, you then build the courage to start coming out to your friends and family. And when you start coming out to your friends and family, fortunately, in today's day and age, at least if you live in a liberal bubble, there's a good chance that your parents and your family are going to accept you and be loving. But there's still a good chance that there's a lot of them are not going to have a really positive initial reaction. And that's very true if you're living in another country outside the US or in many nations where LGBTQ rights are still lagging quite behind the US. So you start to come out, you build the courage, and the first thing you hear is disappointment. They're talking about the fact that you're not going to hit your potential, you're probably not going to hit, you're not going to be professionally satisfied, you're not going to be personally satisfied, there's going to be all of these hurdles, there's going to be limitations and challenges. All right, you sort of go through that, go through the motions, you pick yourself up, and you sort of move forward, and you get into a professional environment. Now I'm talking more about like, let's assume you're someone who got to a Fortune 500 company. You walked in, you sort of went to a great school, you got an internship, you got a job, you walked into a company, and you feel like this is a liberal organization. They've been talking about LGBTQ rights. I'm going to walk into this organization and I'm going to get recognized immediately. I'm going to see peers like me, and I'm going to be able to resonate with them. Well, let me ask you guys a question. How many people here can name a Fortune 500 C-level executive, CEO, COO, CMO, that is gay or out and proud? Go ahead. Keep going. Anyone else?
You have 2 more options out of 500.
So 3 options out of 500 organizations have a C-level executive that is out and proud. There's probably a lot more, but they are not out as much as we wish that they were. So you get into a corporation, you look around the C-level executive board, even within your own corporations, and you don't see a lot of representations at the C-level. You start to feel isolated. You start to feel like, I want to be included in this organization. The organization is liberal, and they're trying to include me as part of the organization, but there's something missing. And I think that's what we feel is the lavender ceiling. And that's the feeling that you get when you talk about your personal experiences and your professional experiences, and you feel like you've hit a limit, and you're not going to be able to go past that. Well, then you start working through, okay, I'm going to shatter this ceiling. I'm going to go ahead and figure out how to go past this. And that's where you start to overachieve. You work really hard. You start building these attributes that are going to be pretty common as you sort of look through the LGBT community, where you pick a profession that you're good at, whether it's sports, business, arts, culture, fashion, music, and you really work your heart out. You put your heart and soul into it to sort of push through that lavender ceiling. This is a little bit of why we call the session lavender ceiling, and actually what was the impetus to RiseOUT.
Thank you. David, let's hear more about RiseOUT and what this year one has been like.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Aanish. I just wanted to also add that, I grew up in a small town in Connecticut, and my first exposure to anything gay was 2 men who came to my prep school and talked about how they were dying of AIDS. And I remember being in that auditorium of 800 people and just like bawling uncontrollably and actually having to leave the session because I thought, oh, these men are like me and this is my future. And it was really troubling. And as Aanish said, I think there is a desire, once you experience that fear and also that shame of isolation and not seeing yourself represented. I have to say, my name is David. I think my mother named me after like David Rockefeller because she had really low expectations for my ability to succeed in business. But, when you don't see yourself represented and don't see those possibilities, for me, what happened, and I think for a lot of other people, is a desire to overcome that shame and internalized homophobia with achievement and overachievement. And now, even today, as an out leader, I like to hire insecure overachievers and then turn them into secure achievers by creating that psychological safety. And one of the ways that we're doing it through RiseOUT is through speaker series. And for the last year, every other month or so, we have had a CMO or a CEO speak about their career journey. And they've been incredibly candid and humble and open to giving back to the rising power gays that attend our events. And it is really amazing to see that 100% of the people that we have asked to do anything for our organization have immediately said yes. And even we did a VIP dinner a month or so ago with our previous speakers and some other people in our network, and 100%, we invited 12 people, they all said, yes, I'm coming. When was the last time you planned a dinner party in New York? And everyone was like, I'm there, I'm clearing my calendar. And so we really, I think, identified a void and a missing in gay professionals. It's so interesting that we can be, we're here at LVMH, we can be the best designers in the world, we can be the best artists in the world, the best rappers who get ignored at award ceremonies, but the best business people is, for whatever reason, not the modality that is expected for people who are creative.
Yeah, so I think the mission for RiseOUT primarily is to identify and bring visibility to those role models. So where are these role models? Where are these C-level executives? And if they're missing for all of the good reasons, how do we go about identifying them? How do we go about finding them? And so it's been our mission for the last year to go identify those folks and bring that visibility to the community. And so we've had these speaker series where we've been able to find out who these folks are from small, medium, and large organizations. And fortunately, they exist. And it's been really gratifying to sort of get a really good response back from them, and they've been coming and talking to us about their career path. And what it means to sort of give back and help younger LGBTQ professionals sort of recognize that they can go past the lavender ceiling and they can go past that and find those opportunities.
I love that because I think there's a lot of talk. We all know in marketing there's a lot of talk, but the action and the fact that you guys are actually doing action outside of that structure an organization provides, that's just like really sort of amazing to take the time to do that. So tell us a little bit more about your journey. Did you have mentors? Did you have, how did you sort of come into being who you were in your career, in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I've had a lot of mentors. I've been successful in my day job, but I don't know if I can count for advocates or sponsors who I count as LGBTQ advocates or sponsors, even though I work at a very fabulous liberal financial organization. And I think for us, that's the part that's missing. I feel like, and there's various reasons for that, right? I mean, we counted only 3 CEOs actually that are out and proud in the Fortune 500 SEP. And there's reasons for that. Number one, I think when, I really also, David's shared a very heartwarming story of his personal life where the fact of the matter is that we actually lost a lot of people back in the 80s to the AIDS epidemic. And so there was a whole generation of business leaders that probably got lost within that, and they didn't get an opportunity to rise to the top. So we have a chance now to sort of identify the youth that's here, sort of bring them up and pull them up the ranks, and give them the opportunities to shine and be the representatives that we want them to be. It's funny because, David, you also represent the rapper. He and I were joking about this because, well, actually, let me set the stage. I think it's even if I wanted a mentor and if people wanted to mentee me, it's like they don't know that I'm in the organization looking for them, and I don't know that they exist.
Right.
Because the visibility doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so visibility is extremely important. You need to bring that more and more to life. And yeah, I think I'm going to pause it. I'm not going to give that example of the rapper and just hold on to that because I think it's too personal. But
I do think it's important to emphasize, the CEO of Dow, DuPont, and the CEO of Apple who came out after they earned the C title. That was the level where they decided, I've achieved enough. I am worthy of also being out and proud. Right. They had to be the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world, right? And that is ridiculous that they felt that they had to wait 20 plus years at a company before they could come out. I am not the kind of person that has to make that conscious choice. Some people do have to come out all the time. And the mental energy that they spend choosing, should I come out to this client? Should I come out to this new boss? Should I come out to this new coworker? Is a complete waste of time. Could be better spent on literally anything else. And I think it's also important to remember that it was only until 2020 when the Supreme Court said that it was illegal to fire someone for being gay. And it was not unanimous. 3 of the 9 judges were like, yeah, it's totally fine. Go ahead and fire people if they're gay. And that means, if you extrapolate that out, they're probably like 30 to 40% of the country probably agrees with those judges. And they are likely in positions of power, which means that someone like me will only go work for an organization that has a perfect HRC score or for myself as an entrepreneur. And by definition, that means that my possibilities, my path to the top is limited because I choose to work in environments that are not homophobic, which is incredibly distracting. Also, if you're in a global organization, one of the ways to accelerate your career is to take foreign assignments, but there are 73 countries where it is illegal to be gay. So again, the mental energy spent on, do I take this assignment? Do I take my husband to this place? That is all part of the lavender ceiling that is a structural barrier to achievement for incredibly talented and attractive people.
but
So one I love that. One thing I will add though,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of organizations that are tactically starting to move in the right direction
Yeah.
to sort of bring that visibility. So I think someone was mentioning in another panel before that there is an ID system now that you can identify who in your organization identifies as LGBTQIA. And I think we've seen a little bit more of that, and we are pushing the organizations that we are talking to sort of put that and institute that policy into place so that folks can go ahead and self-identify as part of the community. Organizations within the Fortune 500 set also starting to figure out how to create an executive forum. So like who are the folks that are within the executive ranks that are identifying as LGBTQI and sort of creating a separate community at that level and using that group of folks then to sort of pull the youth up and give them the opportunities to sort of raise the bar. So there's a little bit more happening, but
There's
we
a
need to
lot,
continue to
yeah.
sort of bring more visibility. The fact that there's still 3 CEOs out of 500.
But we're certainly on a journey, as we can tell from the
Yes.
panel and all the discussions we heard here. So you talked a little bit, David, when we were talking about the leadership skills you develop, being gay and having to sort of work through that, right? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that in terms of the skills that you have had to develop and how that's so relevant for corporate America today?
Yeah, I first want to say that in a lot of organizations, people say, large organizations, they say this is like a relationships culture, right? And relationships are most easily formed through things in common. But no matter how hard I try, my husband cannot get pregnant. And I am not going to be talking to you about being on the soccer field over the weekend with your 3-year-old. Like, that's just not going to be part of my Monday morning conversation.
Yeah.
So we have to find other ways to
Yeah.
find those bonds. And building trust is super important as well. And there's 2 kinds of trust. Trust is rooted in 2 ingredients. One is competence and credibility and reliability and
Sure.
follow through. And the other is warmth and sincerity. And if you take a group of people who are desperate to prove that they belong in the room because they have been historically excluded, it is likely that they are going to rely heavily on credibility and achievement.
Yeah.
But the more you achieve, the more you are different from the average performer. And that does not engender warmth and fuzziness. So I think that as a leader, it is important to validate your team's inherent worth as an individual on your team and create that space for them to be themselves and coach people who are providing unconsciously biased feedback around, Aanish mentioned gay men fall in this sort of third gender of like not quite a man, not quite a woman. As an effeminate gay man, I can say there is no straight man who has ever received a mid-year that said he was abrasive. But I got that for the first 10 years of my career. And after a lot of coaching, I had to learn new skills and lean into empathy and high-risk decision-making and adaptability. And then, like I said, as I've learned those skills, I've been able to impart those on my team, and we've actually celebrated 15 promotions on my team in the last 2 years, and I have fewer than 15 people on my team, so some have gotten promoted more than once, but so it's been a journey for me.
Yeah.
And I think that it is incredibly important for those who are already in power, who are unlikely at this point to be gay, to be active sponsors and to help create that pathway. A lot of information travels through informal networks. And again, if you have been historically excluded from relationships, you don't have that access to information. And making sure that everyone on your team has the playbooks and is given the candid information that they need to be their best selves at work.
Aanish, how about your experience? Because you are sort of, also have the race factor sort of that you have to deal with. So what was that experience like? Was it different in any way?
I think David covered a lot of great points. I think tactically, though, keeping all of those different dimensions of life together, I actually started my career in consulting. And so like, I think Joe Tayano, a really good friend of ours, wrote an opinion piece in Adweek this week. He said, coming out once is a falsehood. Because the fact of the matter is, you're not just coming out once in life, you're coming out consistently in life. And in some cases, when you have a certain job, you're coming out on a weekly or a monthly basis. And so I immigrated here as well, just like you, and I started in consulting, which I thought was a fabulous career. But that's also took me to like different parts of the US, and I met different folks from different society and cultural backgrounds. And I had to do a lot of mental math consistently because I wasn't even out to my colleagues in my consulting firm. So like being out to a client or the vendor that I'm talking to was a daunting experience. And so just out of ease, I said, why bother? This is just awkward. But I think what I started to do next was like when I ended my consulting career and I sort of pivoted into marketing, I decided this was a fresh start. And at that point in time, I just decided to be out and proud in my resume. And by the way, if you're out and proud in your resume, be ready for a little bit of discrimination, but I also wanted to self-select. And then I started to come out in my interview process as well. I made it very clear when I was interviewing with folks that I had a husband or I was gay or in any sort of way I could sort of drop that hint, because I wanted to pick an organization that would be comfortable with me and that would support me from the onset rather than having to go through the process of explaining myself and coming out. I've also been very lucky in the last many years now. I've had bosses and leaders that have actually created a very safe space. And so they'll use subtle ways to sort of make me feel included or comfortable, right? So they'll say things like, oh, I have my friends live in Fire Island and they have a beautiful home and I take my daughter and my husband there every week in the summer. And I think it's a subtle way of saying that I get you, I understand you, and I'm your ally and I support you. And I think that psychological safety, once created, creates a bond and creates a trust, which is really powerful. And so I think we take that really to heart. And I think the number one thing I do with my teams now is to create that psychological safety, because you don't have to be gay to be on my team, of course, right? So you're coming from different backgrounds and dimensions. And that psychological safety could mean different things for you depending on what your personal experiences have been. But it's that psychological safety that creates that trust, as you explained, that really allows you to deliver business results eventually in a meaningful way.
How do you create that psychological safety? I mean, what are ways and tactics that you employ to do that?
You want to go first?
Yeah.
For me, I wrote an article in Adweek about a year ago and talking about the fact that there are a tremendous dearth of out gay CEOs and all the reasons why. And actually, someone who read it said, I'd love to go work for David Knapp, and applied for a job on my team, and he is a superstar. And since I have actually hired 3 out gay men, I'm waiting for the call from HR now, that I only hire gay men, but I'm like, you know what, I'm attracting really strong talent as an out loud and proud leader. And also, I've also had 5 babies birthed on my team. I've promoted a lot of women who are incredibly capable mothers who really know how to prioritize and get things done and don't waste any time. And we have a generous policy at our company with a 6-month maternity leave, and I really think that it's important to celebrate each person on my team for who they are and allow them to move through the world in the way that makes them feel the most confident so that they can deliver those results. And I think by modeling that behavior as a radically candid leader, it opens up so much possibility for them to share about their lives, to share information in an incredibly transparent way, and the results are clear. I think, we were talking in the pre-meet, I won't mention the name of the company because I feel like it would be so controversial, but there is a company that was a pandemic darling that lost $45 billion in market value in the last year.
I guess that one.
And the board of directors was all straight white men, and none of them raised that there might be a temporary tailwind for their organization as they were building a $100 million factory in Ohio. And it just never came up in the boardroom because they were all the good old boys club. And if that is not a powerful case for diversity, I don't know what is. Because if any other voice was in the room, they could have said, hey, this might not be a good idea.
Right.
But instead, they thought, you know what? We have had a lifetime of privilege, and we are entitled to continue this privilege, and there is no reason to think that our 3,000% growth in sales will not continue ad infinitum. So I think that you have to be the change that you want to see. I know that sounds really trite, but I cannot expect my team to be candid with me if I'm not candid. But you also have to create that support. And I think that was, for me, the learning in my leadership journey is, you can't just be a pace setter and say, I'm here, you need to get here. You have to set the bar, but then understand what types of individualized coaching or accommodations each person needs. I mean, I remember I hired a woman who had just given birth, she didn't tell me, and we were at an offsite for 4 hours, and eventually she said, David, I need to use the restroom to pump. And it was like 40 minutes. And I was like, all right, take as much time as you need. But I had no idea. And now I'm like every time I'm like, how much, whatever you need, like your schedule, like you do you, but you have to create that environment for people to ask for what they need and then give it to them.
Yeah. And how can people get involved with RiseOUT? The audience in this room?
Yeah. So I think the way we just started this about a year ago, and we honestly only started activating it about 6 months ago. This was our sourdough bread during COVID. We had a lot of fun, healthy debate and conversation between the three of us, and we have been sort of activating it using a number of ways. One has been a speaker series. So about every 2 months or so, we invite a C-level executive to come and talk to us at a panel discussion and sort of talk about their career path and what does it take to get to the top. We've had a lot of engaging conversations with folks. We can name drop if you want. And beyond that, we've had a couple of closed group dinners, so like a small group of 10 or 12 people just having dinner and just getting to know each other in a more meaningful way. But to be honest with you, we're also evolving. We're trying to figure out what format works. And if you guys want to go to riseout.co, because we couldn't
afford the M.
Yeah, so go to riseout.co. And you can nominate a role model. So if you know someone in your organizations or otherwise that actually is a representative of the LGBTQ community that you would like us to speak to or bring visibility to, please go ahead and nominate them. We would love to speak to them. And just register for our events. Those are some of the ways you can participate.
Yeah, sign up for our email address list at riseout.co, come to our events, and nominate a role model. Let us know who's the best power gay that you know.
Great. So last question, what's the advice to this group of leaders here from your perspective? Sign up?
My best piece of advice is to end on time for the next speaker.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.